Hi, for anybody who's just started to watch this video, this is the first of a small series of discussions and interviews with the initial organisers of the DPE, Decentralising Political Economies research platform. And for those of you who may not have read some of the information available online yet, the DPE Tools platform is a research collaboration between the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester, UK, the City Lab, which is part of the Institute of Art and Technology at Liverpool John Moores University's School of Art and Design in the UK, and the Association of Arte Utile. The whole idea of DPE is really to think of, propose and test possible practical and conceptual frameworks that will enable us to use art and museums as tools for forms of ground-up social, collaborative and constituent activism. So in the light of that, I'm really pleased to be chatting today to Alessandra Saviotti, who's principally going to be looking after the tools and the toolkit section of our platform. And I'd like to begin, Alessandra, by asking you overall, what are your key research interests, especially in relationship to usership and education?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. I'm really excited to be part of the project because I can see how the possibility of really trying to connect the dots between multiple projects that I have been working over the course of the year. So just to clarify a little bit, I'm also a PhD candidate at the Liverpool John Moores University at the School of Art and Design, and I have been collaborating with the Association d'Arte Utile since very long time. So it's really exciting to be part of this project because finally I will have some, like time and space to think about how to connect all the dots. So thinking about my, let's say, interest and my research and how to connect it with the Decentralizing Political Economy platform, let's say that I have been fascinated by the idea of art as a field which is somehow free, perhaps a little bit naively, but I believe that working in the art context allows us to imagine real alternatives that can be, let's say, eventually used as models. So until you meet the institutional environment, such as the museum or an art school or a university, and then you start to think about how can I, put into practice what I have been researching and studying. So, well, in these places like, institutions of education, let's say that our bodies and our behaviors are kind of over-regulated, right? So for instance, you need to have a badge that tracks how and when you are in a certain kind of building, when you are working, etc., etc. So there are also certain kind of expectation, right? And if you don't fit to this kind of expectation, sometimes you are excluded. So if one is at the margins because they don't fit, the tendency is basically to try to create another space, with the consequence that the older space does not disappear, it stays there, and probably it will encourage other spaces of marginalization over and over and over and over. So let's say that the space of art can act sometimes as this kind of safe space where we can, try and challenge through art, like a certain kind of system that exclude some. So I also respect this idea of the withdrawal, and I think it's also a very brave decision if you can do that. But I'm more interested in the idea of hacking the system. So in using my position as a person that usually fits in order to create leaks where knowledge can be kind of free to use by all. So then I wanted to find a way of working that could infiltrate rather than withdraw from the very same institutions that sometimes limit the imagination, if it makes sense in a way. So in particular, I decided to emphasize on one aspect of my research, which is around education. So I believe that we should start from art education in particular, because it's where, let's say, maybe young people start their journey to the arts, especially in our context that we are working, me and you, but also considering our, let's say, European education environment for the art. So if we are able to propose alternatives which work for real and can act as a virus across disciplines, I believe that we could really start seeing some changes in the future. It may be not tomorrow, but like in some near future, hopefully. So the struggle, or not the struggle, but perhaps the challenge that I'm facing right now in thinking about all these particular aspects are like, in what, how can we really try to teach a sort of radical approach that seeks to reorganize the existing configuration of the system within the system itself, and can we use art to do that? So that's a little bit what I'm working on right now.
Okay, that's I think like a fascinating insight into that particular strand of research. What I'd like to ask, and I think what would be interesting for people to know and to think more about is what are your initial plans for starting to develop the toolkits aspect of this site as a means to provide possible frameworks that will allow people to hack the system and to make that very system leaky in the way that you're talking about?
It's an attempt, but hopefully let's see if it's gonna work. But basically I think that there is something to say that is I consider very important, which goes versus the usual idea of how an art project is created, actually. So the moment that we acknowledge usership, in a way, we accept that there might be like a sort of operational mode that begins implementation before all the details of the plan have been settled. And this very same idea of operating without a plot, it's something that is also discussed in the context of the Undercommons by Arney and Moten. So I believe this is really important, and at least is something that I'm really using as not just as a concept like a theory, but really in practice, because it's a sort of very practical attitude, right? So you just do something and then you try to make it fit somewhere. So it is something that it might sound sort of counterintuitive, but I think it's precisely the point, at least for me, because usership doesn't have a plan. It happens. It functions in the present. It functions here and now, because users, in a way, as Stephen Wright would say, know that they are never going to be owners. But however, usership is a very, very powerful tool, because basically in repurposing something that has been used or is used, it transforms it. So it gives it another meaning. And also I really like to use this sentence or this concept that I recently read in a Sarah Ahmed book, What's the Use on the Use of the Use, which is basically when a letterbox is occupied by birds, it becomes a nest. So it's not available for the usual, but nevertheless, its use value is not lost in a way. It's just transformed. So that is really powerful. And and it's also something that I'm trying to pass to my students. I'm pretty much experimenting with them, taking into consideration also our vulnerabilities as well, particularly now that in the context of the pandemic. So for decentralizing political economies for the platform, I conceived, specifically for the toolkit session, I conceived two different, let's say, contributions. So one is a presentation, basically a recorded slideshow that can be used as well as a class presentation. So sometimes someone might be interested in using it. There is my voice, but you know, it can also be muted and just use the slideshow. But anyway, so in this presentation, I specifically highlight some devices and tools such as a mapping system that we have been using as part of another platform, which is the Center for Plausible Economies, developed by Katrin Bond and Kubat Sreder. And these tools have been used to talk about specifically the Association de Arte Útil, in particular related to the economical model behind the association, which we kind of didn't figure it out yet, but it works because we have been there since almost 6 years. And then in the presentation, I decided to include some case studies that challenge the different ways using different strategies. Again, they challenge the fields within they operate. For example, a project by Nuria Güell and Levi Hortas, which is called the Generate Political Art Ethical Protocol, or another project which is really intervening into a higher education by Felipe Castelblanco called the Parasite School, or the example that most of the people are familiar with, which is the Rolling Jubilee, a project by Strike That. So of course there are more examples in the archive, the Arte Útil archive, which is the main resource that I have been using for the toolkit. But I don't want to spoiler too much because it's you know, like very rich, but it's also interesting to I think I try to put some case studies that are very different, coming from very different, you know, like traditions and cultures, but they are really challenging the economic system like it is, because they propose something that it works. It's not just, they propose a one-to-one scale approach. And then I developed a curriculum. It was also, again, quite challenging, but also I had a lot of fun in thinking about something that could be adapted again in different contexts, while maintaining its urgency and its specificity of the place that is trying to research. So I decided to take Liverpool as a case study and to develop the curriculum as an 8-week practice-based training in a form of a city guide. So basically it's developed in order to study how different constituencies that operate in the city organize themselves in order to tackle specific urgencies of the history using art as a tool. So for this, I wanted to avoid the idea of the mock, whether at the same time I wanted to create something that are accessible, that a large group of people could use. So there are initial 2 weeks that are sort of standard, and then other weeks can be adapted and changed. I like it to think about it as a sort of model, but let's see what happens, because, you know, like, and now we are in times that one day after the other, so many things changes. So, but this is the proposal.
Okay, I think that sounds, well, to me, obviously that sounds like a really intriguing and exciting approach, and I'm looking forward to working with you on the development of these ideas over the next couple of years. I think also one of the things about the ideas and the research that you're proposing is it encapsulates both the ambition and also the modesty of the DPE project. On one hand, it's about trying to think about and propose possible models that other people can use and adapt as a means to rethink how we collaboratively use art museums as tools for ground-up social and economic and political change. But on the other, it's also about how those challenges that can be fostered by our uses of art and museums are in a sense quite local and will begin to add up to a kind of a rhizomatic conglomerate that the intention of which is to challenge the kind of the centralization really of ossified political power, and especially in these alt-right neoliberal times. So kind of given that and what you've already said, which is super helpful, I'm going to ask a kind of a cheeky final question. I'm going to ask you what you think your kind of ambitions and outcomes for this project might be over the next couple of years, and what it is you might like to see happen. What would you like to contribute to this project?
Well, ideally, I hope that more and more, let's say, people and readers can really use the tools that we are going to provide and we are going to upload on the website, because it's not only presentations and curriculum and syllabi, but it's also like other kind of resources that they might not be usually accessible, such like academic writing, for instance, because also for the platform, we are really inviting other contributors to that. So I'm really excited to see how we can foster usership also for this website. But also I think that, and this is coming more from my experience as being part of many different collectives all over, not all over the world, but in different places in the world. I really hope that also this platform could act as another kind of network of solidarity that can be really, linked to other kind of conversations, but also other kind of activist movement, for instance, because the power that we have as artists, activists, academics working in this specific context of art and activism, art and politics, socially engaged art practices, arte utile, etc., is really the power of the network. The power of being able to infiltrate institutions. So then we are recognized as part of something that is official, while we could also act with not a secret agenda, but like we could put on the table our, let's say, demands, which is, we can have an idea of which demands we will have, because they are going to be in the Decentralizing Political Economies network, but also this very idea of decentralizing how we work, I think is very relevant. And I hope that through the platform, we would articulate what it means and the potentiality of it. And if we can create a critical mass behind that, I would be super happy. And I think this is a very long-term goal. So I hope to be able to contribute to that.
Alessandra, thank you very much. That's fantastic, and I totally agree with you. This is just the beginning of a long-term and open-ended research project that hopefully will begin to involve more people and more ideas and more possibilities and more evaluations as it grows and develops. And thank you for that. That's a really interesting and inspiring insight into your ideas and what you hope your contribution to this project is going to be. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you, John.